Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we digging into today?
Today, we're taking a trip to 16th century Scotland
Ooh,
with
yeah.
James Hogg's The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner.
Sounds intense.
It's a wild ride, let me tell you.
I bet. What's got you so interested in this one?
Well, we're trying to answer a pretty big question with this deep dive. Can a sinner be justified?
And by who or what, right? That's a question that's haunted humanity for centuries.
Exactly. And Hogg really goes for it with this psychological thriller.
A thriller.
Oh, yeah. It's got gothic horror, philosophical questions, even a touch of the old Faust legend in there.
Wow. Sounds like Hogg was drawing on a lot of sources.
It was, which is why we're bringing in character analysis, historical context on the Scottish Reformation and Calvinism, a whole bunch of stuff to unpack the story.
So where do we start with this whole justified sinner thing?
Well, at its core, it's a really messed up family drama.
Oh.
Yeah. We've got two brothers, Robert and George Colwan, who are just completely at odds with each other.
Classic sibling rivalry.
Oh, this is way more than that. Think jealousy, religious extremism, maybe even some supernatural stuff going on.
Okay, now this is really interesting me.
Right. So first you've got George the Golden Boy, carefree, mirroring their kind of neglectful father.
That's interesting. I'm already seeing some potential family dynamics at play there.
Exactly. And that obliviousness makes him the perfect foil for Robert, who is...
Yeah, Robert's the one who was raised in that super strict Calvinist environment, right?
You got it. His mother and this priest, Robert Ringham, were incredibly influential in his upbringing.
And you can see that influence so clearly in Robert's character, even down to his name.
It's like he's branded by it, this sense of preordained injustice almost from birth.
Exactly. He's carrying the weight of Ringham's worldview on his shoulders from day one.
And then, to make matters even more complicated, you've got this character, Gil-Martin, who pops up.
Ooh, this is the mysterious friend figure, right? Or is it more complicated than that?
That's the million-dollar question. Is he, like, real imaginary a demon? Hogg keeps you guessing the entire time.
I can see why you called it a psychological thriller. It sounds like Hogg really messes with your sense of reality.
He does. Especially with the way he uses the unreliable narrator. We get the official historical account, and then Robert's own twisted version of events.
That's brilliant. It forces the reader to become a kind of detective trying to piece together the truth.
Exactly. It makes you question everything you're reading and who you choose to believe. It really gets you thinking about the nature of truth and perception itself, doesn't it?
It makes you realize that there's often a huge gap between how we experience the world and what we might call objective reality.
Especially when it comes to something as personal and powerful as faith. It's like trying to navigate a maze with a distorted map.
Exactly, and that sense of disorientation is only heightened when you consider the historical context.
Which is 16th century Scotland. Just a tad chaotic, right?
To say the least. Imagine a world exploding with religious turmoil, Catholics versus Protestants, the rise of Calvinism.
A powder keg is a pretty apt description.
It was a time of immense ideological struggle where faith was inseparable from power. And right in the thick of it, you have Robert trying to make sense of his place in a world defined by Calvinism.
Talk about intense. Can you give us a crash course in Calvinism?
Yeah.
What are the key things to keep in mind when we're trying to understand Robert's journey?
Sure. At its heart, Calvinism revolves around this idea of predestination.
Meaning what exactly?
Basically that God has already decided who's saved and who's damned even before we're born.
Whoa, so free will's out the window.
Not entirely, but it becomes a much more complex issue within this system.
I can only imagine. And to make it even heavier, you've got this concept of God's absolute sovereignty.
Right, so everything that happens, good or bad, is seen as part of God's divine plan.
Which, for someone like Robert, who's already wrestling with this feeling of preordained injustice.
It's a recipe for disaster. Does it offer him some kind of twisted justification for his actions? Or does it just bury him under the weight of his perceived sinfulness?
These are questions that still resonate centuries later.
They do. And Hogg doesn't let us off the hook. He weaves these questions into the very fabric of the story, through symbolism even.
Oh yeah, like what?
We'll take Robert's clothing, for instance. He's always described as wearing these dark, somber colors.
It's almost like a physical manifestation of the darkness he carries inside.
I know, precisely. On the one hand, it reflects the influence of Robert Ringham, the priest, who also dresses in this austere, severe style.
So it's like a visual reminder of Ringham's hold on him.
Exactly. But it also goes deeper than that. These dark clothes, they mark Robert as an outsider. Someone set apart from the world, weighed down by this sense of doom almost.
It's like he's wearing his supposed sin for everyone to see even though he believes he's justified.
Which brings us to another fascinating element, the whole Faustian bargain thing.
Gil-Martin. You knew he'd come up again.
He's like the embodiment of that Faustian temptation, but Hogg gives it a distinctly Scottish Calvinist twist.
How so?
Well, think about the classic Faust story. It's usually about someone selling their soul for knowledge or power, right? But Robert isn't after those things.
So what does Robert want?
He wants something much more insidious. He wants justification. He craves validation for his anger, his resentment towards a world he feels has wronged him.
So his deal with Gil-Martin is less about gaining something and more about justifying what he already feels.
Exactly. It's a bargain to appease his conscience, to silence those doubts that plague him.
And that's what makes his descent into darkness all the more terrifying. Because he's not just some power-hungry fool, he's driven by this need for righteousness.
Twisted as that righteousness may be.
Exactly. And that's what elevates the Private Memoirs. Beyond just a spooky story or a theological debate, it becomes this chilling exploration of the human psyche.
It's a stark reminder that even with the best of intentions, our beliefs can be twisted to serve our darkest impulses.
It's a haunting thought, but a necessary one. And the thing that gets me is how Hogg takes these big theological ideas and weaves them into...
It's a talent.
A thriller.
Absolutely, because it's not just philosophy, it's a story that grabs you.
And doesn't let go.
Exactly. It sticks with you because it's dealing with those huge themes, faith and guilt, free will.
Stuff that's relevant no matter what century you're living in.
Exactly. And one of the things that really struck me was that cyclical nature of violence, how it plays out in families.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
We see it with Robert and George, obviously, but it goes back even further to their parents.
It's like this cycle of dysfunction and discord that they can't escape.
Passed down through generations.
Like a poison. And Hogg leaves us with this question: can we break free from these inherited patterns, or are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Which is even more unsettling when you remember an unreliable narrator.
Right. Because just when you think you've figured out who to root for, who's right and who's wrong, Hogg pulls the rug out from under you.
Exactly. You're constantly second-guessing yourself, questioning everything.
It forces you to confront your own biases as a reader. You come to the text with your own ideas about good and evil justice and all of that.
But Hogg reminds us that nothing is that simple.
Right. Truth can be elusive, messy, subjective even.
It's like we're not just reading the story, we're part of this puzzle.
Trying to piece together the truth alongside the editor who discovers those memoirs.
And in a way, isn't that what we're all doing in life?
Trying to make sense of the world with the limited information we have.
It's humbling when you think about it like that. So
it really is.
After spending all this time with the Private Memoirs, what's the biggest takeaway for you?
For me, it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind faith, especially when it's used to justify harmful actions.
Because
Robert's so desperate to be justified that he ends up becoming a prisoner of his own righteousness, a pawn in this game he doesn't even fully understand.
It's a powerful reminder that good intentions aren't always enough.
And that even the most rigid belief systems can be twisted and manipulated.
Leaving us with more questions than answers.
But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real value of a book like this is that it makes us think critically about our own beliefs and biases.
And to remember that there's always more than one side to every story.
Exactly. The Private Memoirs stays with you. It challenges you to confront the complexities of good and evil and human heart.
And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought to ponder. Does Robert find peace in the end, or is he condemned by his actions?
It's up to each reader to decide.
Hogg leaves that answer open-ended, forcing us to grapple with the implications of Robert's choices. And that, I think, is what makes the Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner such a haunting and unforgettable work of literature. So if this deep dive piqued your interest, be sure to check out the book for yourself and let us know what you think.